All right, Snyder, Gunn, it's my turn.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Hey, travelers, welcome back to Roberto's Room. I just want to say before we get into this video, thank you so very much for all the love and support you showed my Phase 4 and Phase 5 fixing the multiverse of the MCU videos. My first videos to get to 1,000 views, and I am so excited. One got to 1,000, one has just reached over 500, and I got over 20 new subscribers. Thank you to all of y'all that are new to the channel. Welcome. I am so glad to have you. This video, though, is for the DC fans.
Finally!
I feel like DC fans like me have been shortchanged for far too long with WB and all of their just unnecessary cowering and just mismanagement of some of the greatest superheroes that have ever been created, and I think it's time for a change. Unlike with my Phase 4 and Phase 5 videos, I'm not really fixing something as much as I am creating. Really, Phases 1, 2, and 3, which I'm, for the DC universe, I'm calling them chapters. Chapter 1, which is my Phase 1, Chapter 2, and Chapter 3. I'm only going to be talking about Chapter 1 in this video, with the others coming later as we get closer and closer to Darkseid. I am still going to use that. I'm going to use a lot of the movies that have already been made and just kind of fine-tune the phase, if you will, to give us really a definitive DC cinematic universe and what I would do. Well, before we begin, if you would, please drop a like, please drop a comment, let me know what you think about what I'm going to do, maybe drop some guesses down in the comments below. And as well, if you're watching this video and you haven't, please subscribe. I would love to have you along for the ride. I've got some things planned, some really special things once we hit that 100 subscriber mark and some other subscriber marks down the road. So please join us. Please subscribe and hit that notification bell to be notified of all of the videos that we post here on this channel. But without further ado,
Smile, everyone! We're back.
let's tackle DC, shall we? So, just like I did with the Phase 4 and Phase 5, I'm going to link TV shows and movies and kind of interlace them. And I am starting, of course, with Man of Steel. I actually liked what Zack Snyder did. I would maybe give it a little bit of a lighter tone, but I think the movie was really good, and it gave us a view of how really the world would react to if there was someone like this out there, like Perry White said in the film.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Man of Steel would release in my DC cinematic universe on June 5th, 2026. I love the dynamic between Henry Cavill and Amy Adams, and I think that the cast was phenomenal as well, so I really wanted to keep it as is. However, my DCEU starts to change right after Man of Steel with the very first HBO Max show. Green Lantern Season 1 would run from August 6th to October 8th, 2026, and that would introduce Hal Jordan, which I was looking to cast either Chris Pratt or Glenn Powell. I really liked Glenn Powell for this role as an established Lantern, training Jon Stewart, who kind of pick out a left field for casting, and I do have some casting choices in my DCCU, but some of them I want to leave to you in the comments what you think some of these characters should be, how they should be cast. But for Jon Stewart, I actually have Winston Duke, and I wanted to use the Green Lantern show kind of like True Detectives, but in space, with the Green Lanterns, especially Hal Jordan training Jon Stewart to solve mysteries and figure out exactly what's going on. I figured this show could be centered around a mystery and have, for the first season, Black Hand as the villain. My goal with these shows is to have one a year, so that way you could really throw a good budget at them, make them look good, and give them what Lanterns or the other shows that I'm going to have in my DC Cinematic Universe really need, which is just some tender love and care and a good bit of money thrown in so that they actually look like they belong in the same universe as the cinematic outings. I would also, for my Green Lantern TV show, have Sinestro in the series, and I wanted to give him a 3-season arc, kind of from hero to villain. He gets kind of disillusioned with the Guardians and the Lanterns, and of course that turns him into the villain down the road. But I wanted to start him as a hero and someone that actually helps to train John Stewart. My second film in the DC Cinematic Universe on December 18th, 2026 is Batman. And of course, I am going to have Ben Affleck play him. However, with this first film, I wanted to kind of pay homage to the Arkham Asylum games and use this opportunity to have a lot of the villains and kind of build out the DC Cinematic Universe in a really quick way, but in a way that feels natural because these villains would have already been out there. And with this kind of self-contained movie, having it also give us a lot of flashbacks, I wanted to show the death of Jason Todd, which of course we see his suit in Batman v Superman. I don't change that, but because we saw the suit, I wanted to kind of mean something when we see it in Batman v Superman and give us the death of Jason Todd and really give us, with that, an excuse for Batman to be the Batman that we saw in Batman v Superman, a Batman that has become disillusioned. We really get dropped into that Batman with no real history before other than a few mentions, and I feel like that is one of the negatives of the DCEU, is that we have this Batman that is just killing people for no reason, and I feel like it's fine if he does, but there has to be a reason, and I feel like this movie would have given him a reason to do just that. And this whole movie is, of course, him trying to escape the Arkham Asylum as the villains take over, and sets up the arc of redemption that we see through BVS and Justice League, with, again, explaining more of his turn to the dark. Next, on March 5th, 2027, we have Wonder Woman. I actually love Patty Jenkins' first film, and I have no notes on that. I think that it should stay as is. It was a great introduction to Diana, and I feel like it is needed to set up the big three, or the DC Trinity, as we go into BVS and as well Justice League. In 2027 as well, on August 5th to October 7th, we have Suicide Squad. Now, I did something a little different. I know Suicide Squad initially was 2 movies, Suicide Squad and The Suicide Squad, but I feel like the Suicide Squad tend to lend themselves more to a season of TV with their power sets, and I think that giving them a season of television, again, a limited run, but a season of TV for the 2027 year really gives us an opportunity to get to know them better, flesh them out more, and really get to know them in a way that a 2-hour movie simply just can't. Next, on December 17th, 2027, rounding out that year, we have the release of Aquaman. I actually was going to recast Aquaman and have Alan Ritchson play Aquaman. I know he already played him in Smallville, and I think that now he looks more the part of the traditional Aquaman. Not to knock Jason Momoa, but I wanted him to play Lobo in my DC Cinematic Universe. He was born to play Lobo, I think, and having him as Aquaman was something that, okay, I bought into it, but I think that Alan Ritchson would probably play a much better Aquaman. I would actually keep the story as is. I think the story was good, and Patrick Wilson and the rest of the cast did well. The only cast that I would subtract, I think would be Amber Heard. I don't think she should be in this movie, and I think that Emilia Clarke would have probably played a better Mira, to be honest with you. Then, on June 2nd, 2028, we have Batman v Superman. Now that we've met both Batman and Superman, and we've kind of set up his descent into darkness, now that turn of Ben Affleck's Batman doesn't seem as jarring with having that first film to help us introduce who this character is and what this version of Batman has to bring to the table, especially with the rise of the metahumans. I think that, again, that is something important, and I feel like now, if we have a movie with both of them and him having this revenge story against the metahumans for all the destruction they caused, I feel like that makes more sense, and where we find him makes more sense, having him in his own movie prior to that. Then on August 3rd through September 7th, 2028, we have season 2 of the Green Lantern Corps series on HBO Max, and this one actually centers on Amun Sur, who is the son of Abin Sur, who releases Parallax in order to get revenge on the Lantern. Since his father's ring did not choose him, he thought that he would be the next Lantern in line, but of course the ring chooses the wearer, and he uses the power of Parallax to create the yellow ring. This entire conflict, of course, we see that it starts to pull Sinestro away from the Green Lantern Corps and really causing him to question the will of the Guardians as well as the mission of the Green Lantern Corps itself. Then, on December 22, 2028, rounding out the 2028 year, we have The Flash. Now, I am going to recast The Flash for my DC Cinematic Universe, and I think that honestly, today, there's no better Flash than Jack Quaid. I think he fits the role much better, especially for a Barry Allen, than Ezra Miller ever did. I don't really like Ezra Miller in this character. I feel like he just doesn't have the chops for Barry Allen, and I feel like Jack Quaid could pull off a lot better performance. I would honestly make this movie about him getting his powers, with him already being teased in Batman v Superman and going into the Justice League movie. Give him his origin story and all the things that we know the Flash to be famous for, the murder of his mom, but of course we will set up that mystery and have him face off in his first outing against Mirror Master. I think this movie would be great if it was book-ended and the maybe after credit scene, if you will, of the movie, or the last scene of the movie, have him going back to his quote-unquote lair and seeing Batman seated there, which of course leads into the Justice League film. The last film that I would have going into Justice League would be Cyborg on February 2nd, 2029. I loved the story that they gave him in the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League, and I want to keep a lot of those elements. However, I feel like in the Justice League movie, they bloated it too much, and that movie needs to focus more on the League. I love the movie, but I feel like having Cyborg get his own movie beforehand really would benefit him going into the Justice League, especially with the sacrifice of his dad, which I still want to keep. Giving him another movie to flesh out that relationship, I think, would go a long way. Then on May 4th, 2029, I would have Justice League. I would have it play out a lot like the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League, but again, you didn't have to have the Flash introduction, and you didn't have to have all of the Cyborg stuff, so you could really trim the runtime there, make it maybe a 3-hour movie. I think this movie deserves to be 3 hours. It's a Justice League film, and especially with the buildup of the Chapter 1, quote-unquote, I feel like now that we've seen these characters, given them room to breathe, they could come together in a really awesome way against Steppenwolf as we tease Darkseid and what is to come. And then, of course, rounding out my Chapter 1 of the DC Cinematic Universe, I have another HBO Max show running from August 2nd to October 4th because we saw him in Justice League, and I want to keep that scene there as well of Lois having a conversation with Swanwick, which of course turns into Martian Manhunter. I want to give Martian Manhunter his own series on HBO Max, which of course fleshes out his origin story and sets him up to show up in later movies, as I would have Justice League end like it did in the current timeline with the tease for Nightmare and the ending with Martian Manhunter. But that's my chapter 1 of the DC Cinematic Universe. And I wanted to keep things simple on the first outing. Again, we are just introducing the major players, and I wanted to build it slow. I think that that's a mistake that DC has made over the years, is that it doesn't build slow and it wants to put the cart before the horse. And I feel like this version of the DC Cinematic Universe gives the characters room to breathe and makes sense having them come together in the Justice League film, and as well gives you room to go in chapters 2 and 3, which we will be talking about later. So that was my chapter 1 of the DC Cinematic Universe breakdown. What did you think about it? Whatever you thought, drop it in the comments down below, and please let me know as well. Drop a like, and again, if you've gotten to this point in the video and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I would love to have you along for the ride. I've got phases 2 and 3, really chapter 2 and 3 coming soon, so please stay tuned for those. I've got them incoming. I actually already have them planned out, and I'm so excited to share those with you. But until next time, thank you so much for joining us, travelers, and as always, go with grace.